In the dead of night in September 1849, a woman named Harriet Tubman crept through the forests of Maryland, her heart pounding, her body exhausted, and every step carrying her closer to freedom, but also closer to hunger. For weeks she had traveled by moonlight, hiding by day, surviving on water from streams and whatever the forest could offer. Then, on the riverbanks and forest edges, she stumbled upon something unexpected, a fruit unlike anything most modern Americans have ever tasted. It hung heavy on low branches, its flesh rich and fragrant, a tropical whisper in the temperate woods. For 3 crucial weeks, that fruit wasn't just food, it was hope. It gave her calories, strength, and the will to press on when everything else had failed. Today, you won't find this fruit in any grocery store. Not in New York. Not in California. Not even in farmers' markets. It's nearly invisible in the modern food world. And yet, it's native to more than 24 states, a fruit that once sustained indigenous nations, fascinated founding fathers, and fed explorers when their supplies ran dry. Most Americans have never tasted it, never heard its name, never seen it ripen in September sun. So how did something so delicious, so nutritious, and so deeply woven into America's story simply fade away? The answer doesn't lie in taste or availability. It lies in one invention, one technological shift that reshaped food forever and made this incredible fruit obsolete. But before we get to that invention, you need to know this wasn't just a fruit. It was survival itself. You've probably walked past it without knowing. Maybe you've even lived your entire life in one of the 26 states where it grows wild, from Florida to New York, from Nebraska to Ontario, and never once noticed it. It doesn't grow in neat rows or shiny supermarket crates. It doesn't travel well, ship well, or sit on shelves for long. But the pawpaw, or Asimina triloba, is the largest edible fruit native to North America. And its flavor? Nothing like you and apples do expect from a forest fruit. Imagine a perfect blend of mango, banana, and pineapple, with the texture of a custard that melts on your tongue. Rich, tropical, almost decadent, and yet, it and apples, best born not in jungles, but in the temperate woodlands of Appalachia and the Midwest. It grows without pesticides. It ripens in September. It requires no human intervention to flourish. And yet, it's been completely erased from the modern food system. Not because it failed to thrive, but because it didn't fit. Not into shelves. Not into shipping containers. Not into the new rules of grocery chains and supply logistics. And here's the most startling part, this isn't some obscure jungle fruit or rare botanical anomaly. The pawpaw is part of your landscape. It grows near creeks and along forest edges, in backyard lots and forgotten groves. It's been here all along, hidden in plain sight. So how did such a local treasure become an invisible ghost in the age of global food? And why did generations of Americans, from native tribes to presidents, once depend on it to survive? Long before grocery stores, before colonial maps redrew the land, before refrigeration changed the rules, the pawpaw was already thriving. For thousands of years, indigenous nations didn't just eat it, they cultivated it. This wasn't some forgotten berry scraped off a forest floor. This was agriculture, deliberately planted and passed down through generations. The Shawnee people had an entire month on their calendar dedicated to the pawpaw harvest. The Powhatan called it Asimina, a name that still lives on in its scientific classification, Asimina triloba. And deep in the caves of Alabama, archaeologists found pawpaw seeds dating back 8,000 years, a reminder that this fruit was part of North America and Appo's human story since nearly the beginning. They didn't leave it to chance. Indigenous farmers carefully selected the best trees, planted them near settlements, and spread them along trade and migration routes. These weren't wild accidents, they were intentional food systems, designed for sustainability, for nourishment, for survival. When Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto crossed the Mississippi Valley in 1541, his chronicler didn't describe untamed wilderness, he described managed pawpaw groves, carefully tended by native communities. These people weren't just foraging. They were farming a fruit so rich in nutrition, so dense with energy, that it could sustain entire villages through lean seasons. And when colonists arrived, they didn't reject the pawpaw. They embraced it. But before we get there, you should know just how much the founding fathers loved this so-called poor man's banana. It wasn't just indigenous nations who recognized the pawpaw's value. America's most iconic leaders didn't just eat this fruit, they revered it. George Washington, the first president of the United States, didn't merely snack on pawpaw, he served it chilled as dessert to guests at Mount Vernon. This wasn't a makeshift survival food. In his home, it was a delicacy. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence and a lifelong botanist, personally cultivated pawpaw trees at Monticello. It wasn't for show. It was because he valued their taste, their resilience, and their place in the American landscape. Among all the exotic imports he experimented with, he kept pawpaw, a local fruit, close to home. Even explorers relied on it. In 1806, as the Lewis and Clark expedition ran out of provisions deep in what's now Missouri, their food stocks dwindled to nothing. And what saved them? Pawpaw. In his journal, William Clark wrote that they were entirely out of provisions and subsisting on pawpaw alone. Days later, he added that they could live very well on the pawpaw. Not just survive, thrive. So what does that tell us? This wasn't some rare fruit known only to a few. The pawpaw was woven into the very foundation of America, from indigenous villages to presidential estates to exploration of the western frontier. And yet, despite all of that, it would one day disappear from every store shelf, every farm catalog, every food pyramid. But before it vanished, scientists discovered something remarkable about this fruit, something that makes its erasure even more shocking. If pawpaw were rediscovered today by a health influencer or biohacker, it would be labeled a miracle fruit. A new age superfood. A revolution in wellness. But the truth? The science was always there, we just stopped looking. A single 100-gram serving of pawpaw contains 3 times more vitamin C than an apple. Twice the vitamin C of a banana. But that's just the beginning. It packs 10 times more calcium than both apples and bananas. And the iron? Depending on the cultivar, pawpaw contains 20 to 70 times more iron than either. That's not a typo, it's a nutritional landslide. But pawpaw doesn't stop at minerals. Its protein content includes all 9 essential amino acids, something almost unheard of in fruits. It matches or even outperforms bananas and oranges in nearly every category. Then there's the fat profile, something most fruits can't even claim to have. According to research from Kentucky State University, pawpaw boasts 40% monounsaturated fats, the same kind of heart-healthy fats found in olive oil and avocados. It has lower saturated fat, better cardiovascular impact, and a nutrient density that makes supermarket fruits look like sugar water. And if that weren't enough, pawpaw contains a class of plant compounds called acetogenins, which have shown early promise in anti-cancer research. Its bark, leaves, and twigs even produce natural insecticides, making the tree self-protecting and pesticide-free. This wasn't just food. It was medicine, fuel, sustenance, and resilience, all wrapped in a soft, custard-like package. So how did something this powerful get dropped from the American diet? It didn't spoil. It didn't go extinct. It simply couldn't compete with one invention, the one that froze it out of modern life. Pawpaw wasn't defeated by disease, or drought, or changing tastes. It was logistics that buried it. A single invention in 1938 quietly altered the entire course of American food history, and sealed pawpaw's fate. That year, a black inventor named Frederick McKinley Jones created the first portable refrigeration unit for trucks. Before his design, cold transport meant packing produce in ice, unreliable, messy, and short-lived. But Jones's invention changed everything. Suddenly, food could be shipped thousands of miles across the country in a perfectly controlled cold environment. And with that breakthrough, the cold chain was born. By 1940, But to thrive in this new system, fruits needed a long shelf life. At least 7 days. Ideally 14. Apples could last 2 to 4 weeks in storage. Bananas, when picked green, could survive up to 2 weeks. Oranges, 3 to 8 weeks, depending on ripeness. But pawpaw? Once ripe, it gives you 48 hours. 3 days, if you and apples, lucky. It bruises easily. It ferments quickly. You can't pick it early, it ripens fast and softens even faster. It evolved for a different kind of journey, from tree to mouth in 100 feet, not 1,000 miles in a diesel-chilled truck. And in a food system that now prioritizes distance over flavor, durability over nutrition, pawpaw didn't stand a chance. It wasn't banned. It wasn't outlawed. It was simply left behind, a casualty of progress. But the damage wasn't just nutritional. What came next was an erasure far deeper, one that reshaped the American diet and memory. As the cold chain spread and supermarkets centralized, a new kind of fruit rose to dominance, not because it was better tasting or more nutritious, but because it traveled well. That fruit was the banana. Imported from thousands of miles away, picked green in Ecuador or Guatemala, and shipped across oceans in chilled containers, bananas checked every box for the new system: long shelf life, easy to stack, low spoilage, and consistent appearance. Nutrition, flavor, local sourcing, those became secondary. Meanwhile, pawpaw, grown just miles from American homes, with twice the vitamin C and 10 times the calcium, was dropped from the supply chain. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it couldn't survive a week on a shelf. In the new food economy, that made it worthless. By the 1960s, bananas occupied more shelf space in U.S. grocery stores than any American-grown fruit, including apples. The exotic import had replaced the native powerhouse. The fruit that once fed presidents, explorers, indigenous nations, Civil War soldiers, and freedom seekers, was now invisible. And with it, something deeper vanished. Not just a fruit, but a connection. To the land. To the seasons. To an ecosystem of plants, butterflies, and people who once depended on it. But this wasn't just a dietary shift, it was a cultural amnesia. One that left Americans consuming 35 pounds of imported bananas per year, while the pawpaw trees in their own forests went untouched. And the irony? Those bananas, shipped in by the ton, offered less nutrition, more environmental cost, and none of the resilience of the fruit we abandoned. But the story doesn't end there. Because even after being pushed to the margins, the pawpaw never truly disappeared. When pawpaw vanished from grocery stores, it wasn't just a fruit that disappeared, it was an entire ecosystem, a piece of cultural identity, and a forgotten chapter in America's story. The zebra swallowtail butterfly, for example, relies exclusively on pawpaw trees to reproduce. When pawpaw orchards disappeared from farms and wild groves were cleared for roads and subdivisions, the butterfly population declined, quietly, alongside its host plant. A living link in the chain of biodiversity was broken. We also lost self-sufficiency. Pawpaw doesn't need pesticides. It doesn't need refrigeration. It doesn't need imported fertilizers or irrigation systems. It thrives naturally, resisting pests and diseases on its own, something almost unheard of in modern agriculture. And we lost the taste of our own soil. Most Americans under 50 have never even heard of pawpaw, let alone tasted it. They've been raised on fruits shipped in boxes, bred for transport, not flavor. Meanwhile, a native fruit, bursting with tropical flavor and unmatched nutrition, grows in their own backyards, unnoticed and uneaten. But the story is starting to shift. In 1990, a researcher named Kirk Pomper launched the Pawpaw program at Kentucky State University, dedicating years to studying, cultivating, and preserving the fruit. Today, there are over 27 named cultivars, each refined to bring pawpaw back into modern awareness. And while you still won't find Pawpaw at Walmart or Whole Foods, it's quietly making a comeback through farmers markets, homesteads, and a growing community of gardeners planting trees that take 6 to 8 years to fruit, not for quick profit, but for legacy. In 2019, the Ohio Pawpaw Festival drew over 10,000 people. Recipes, tastings, orchard tours, not just curiosity, but a movement. Because Pawpaw didn't disappear from the land. It disappeared from our tables. But now, after 7 decades in the shadows, it may finally be time to remember what we abandoned, and why it's worth reclaiming. Harriet Tubman didn't know what a cold chain was. She didn't need barcodes, shipping labels, or refrigeration trucks. She needed something far simpler, food that wouldn't betray her. And in the dense forests of Maryland, Pawpaw was there. It's still here. For 70 years, we forgot it. We chose durability over flavor, shelf life over substance, imports over independence. We paved over the orchards, forgot the taste, ignored the trees. But the Pawpaw never left. It kept growing, quiet, resilient, patient. In backyards, along creeks, behind old barns. Waiting. Waiting for someone to notice. Today, you don't need a farm or a permit to reclaim it. You can plant a Pawpaw tree in your yard. In 6 to 8 years, it will feed you for 5 decades, no chemicals, no machines, no shipping containers. Just roots in the ground and fruit in your hands. And maybe, in a world racing to go faster and farther, the Pawpaw reminds us that some things were never meant to travel thousands of miles. Some things, the best things, grow close to home. The fruit that once fed freedom seekers in the dead of night is still here, ripening in the shadows. Maybe it's time we finally came back for it.